Denmark has been destroying Sweden for many years. From funny instances such as Swedish police mistaking a drunk for speaking Danish and a Swedish father naming their child Legos, to Danes ruling on the throne for years, Denmark has been confronting Swedes for a long time. Denmark and Sweden have a history dating back to 10,000 BC, when humans began migrating to these islands after the last ice age. They were usually hunters who made a living by fishing and killing sea lions. Then, in 3000 BC, the fertile land drew their attention to agriculture. And without a doubt, this was Denmark. Farmers began employing iron and bronze instead of stealing from here, and they even established trading links with the Roman Empire. Wow, right? Yes, Scandinavian nations have a rich past. In this video, we'll discuss the history of these nations, from the Viking period through the treaties that were signed and broken, as well as the union that brought both kingdoms together. Welcome to the video where nations battled for the throne in both fair and deceptive ways. But it was here when the stories of thousands of years of rivalry began. It all started with Vikings who used to say, "Better to die with honor than live with shame." For the record, there were 3 types of Vikings. The lowest level was thralls, who did house chores and agricultural work, but could be sacrificed when necessary. Then there were carls, who were builders, farmers, and blacksmiths, and jarls, who served as state administrators. Beginning around 793 AD, Vikings from Denmark plundered, robbed, and even established trading contacts with the culture. However, Swedish Vikings began to migrate east, mainly to Muslim nations. They shaped Europe throughout the 8th century AD. But the war began after 250 years of the reign, when Conte the Great, son of Danish Viking Sweden Forkbeard, became the emperor of southern Sweden, Greenland, the Faroe Islands, Shetland, and other places. They've had over 30 wars during the 15th century, or since the Battle of Fellsvallr in 986. But it wasn't until Christianity arrived that the two countries became more accepting of a new way of life. However, the Viking blood of the people continued to boil from time to time, and the war continued. In a nutshell, Denmark was a big force in the region at first, and even if Sweden tried, it couldn't win the war most of the time. Consider Erik Skada's voyages, in which Swedish rulers came to Denmark numerous times to obtain power from area leaders and gain control. But this heightened pressure. Or the Battle of Lien in 1209, when Vladimir II clashed with Erik X and won southern Sweden. Then 19 years later, he won another battle with Swedish King Erik XI and took control of Scania. The Scandinavian nations therefore had a significant internal battle going on, even though his region appeared from the outside to be a big and powerful empire. Consequently, several poor choices were made. In the year, for instance, Denmark sold Estonia to the Germans to demonstrate its authority, and Sweden extended to the Åland Islands. But as previously said, when 2 people are fighting, the third person usually gains the advantage. As a result, the Hanseatic League, commonly recognized as the German merchants, entered in the 14th and 15th centuries, controlling the Baltic trade route and enraging Denmark. Now, creating a union was the only way to stand up against German bullies and other European thugs of the time. So, taking a quick step back, the Vikings were controlling, ruling, and bringing new cultures, which helped to transform their countries into huge giants. Battles were fought between Sweden and Denmark for control of the area. But amid their clashes, the other bullies emerged, which could have easily destroyed them. The Kalmar Union entered the picture at this point. On paper, this appears to be a good plan, but all 3 countries, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, were concerned about what would happen to their independence. However, it wasn't as simple as that. In fact, Margaret I, the Danish king's daughter, wed Håkon VI, the king of Sweden and Norway. Since the Margaret brother passed away without leaving Denmark with an heir to the throne, she decided to choose Olaf II as the next ruler. Therefore, Olaf II was ultimately recognized by the queen as the rightful successor to Sweden, even after the passing of her husband. As a result, a plan was drawn up, and Olaf II was positioned to succeed as ruler when his father passed away in 1380. This appears to be the ideal chance for the 3 areas waiting to take a firm stance against all superpowers. But at the age of 16, less than a decade later, Olaf II was killed in the Battle of Gabosen, when a new emerging Swedish monarch named Albert of Mecklenburg defeated him. When he passed away, he left an eternal mark of unbelievable power. Until this point, the Danish Empire ruled the Union, but the death of Olaf II cracked the stability of Danish power. On one side, when the entire region was pleading for assistance, Margaret adopted a new heir, Eric, who formalized the Union. To preserve the spectrum, the Kalmar Union had a foothold in standards for domestic policy, economy, and even foreign affairs. Its true objective was to block German expansion northward into the Baltic region. Even while this partnership worked well for a period of time, or during the 16th century, it eventually fell apart. Sweden, despite understanding the consequences of its actions, rebelled against the king's crown and landed on the head of Christian II in 1520. Within 3 years, he had completed the full plan to revolt and break away from the Union. To get away, he considers the military action against 82 Swedish rivals. It resulted in a bloodbath, as well as the deportation of Gustav Troll to Denmark. However, during Sweden's third rebellion against the Kalmar Union in 1521, Christian II was deposed from the throne. The country's new king was Gustav Vasa, the son of one of the rebels. This left Norway and Denmark alone. Although this was hardly the most peaceful time since the 7-year conflict between Norway and Sweden started for supremacy, it even followed the conflict between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden over trade and maritime disputes. Then, in the mid-17th century, there was a 30-year Protestant versus Catholic war that ended in 1629 with the Treaty of Lubeck. But similar to the Twitter war of 2016, Sweden decided to try their luck in Denmark, Norway this time once again. This ended up being a terrible disaster, resulting in peace in 1645. But like before, the battle raged on for who was more powerful in the region. This is where the League of Armed Neutrality was created, giving the British shivers. In the Copenhagen invasion, the British invaded and destroyed the entire naval fleet of Denmark and Norway in 1801 and 1807. Despite Denmark's alliance with France, it did not work out. Here once again, the Dano-Swedish War was fought in 1808 to 1809, as Swedes believed Denmark to be weak, but it only ended up with 420 Swedish forces wiping out from the face of the earth, along with approximately 150 men surrendered at Berby. This is where the Treaty of Jokoping was signed in 1809, which again ended up with a fight. Hence, it all goes back to Swedish people trying to prove their dominance again and again. The Treaty of Kiel was signed here between Denmark and Sweden in 1814, in which Danish authority handed away Norway to the Swedes. Even if these two countries became relatively friendly in the 19th century, they loathed a lighthearted connection. For example, one of the tweets from Denmark's official account says, "But my dear Swedenese, tomorrow we all know you're back in Denmark to buy more alcohol." During both world wars, both countries remained in the audience rather than on the battle floor. But don't think of Sweden as the sole victim here. Despite being beaten up by the Vikings to the kings of Denmark and eventually agreeing to the pact, he didn't spare a single time when it came to taking advantage. After World War II, when Germany invaded Denmark, Sweden let its troops pass through and shared secret military information with the British. If you think this is hypocrisy, consider this. He even let the British utilize its airport bases for ongoing fights. However, when it came to protecting itself against Germany, the Swedes joined NATO. It even became an ally of Denmark and the European Union, since in the end, they clearly understood the history. Their rivalry can now be seen in soccer, ice hockey, and handball. Now that we've covered their entire history and how Denmark has been the ultimate force, crushing Sweden time and time again, let's move on to the present. Let's face it, Denmark has the upper hand when it comes to wind farms and turbine-based energy production. This country's sustainable energy solutions have long given it an advantage over Sweden in this field. In fact, wind turbines and solar panels have generated 67% of the country's power demand in the first half of 2023. Aside from that, if you look at the public assessments of the architecture on Quora, you will constantly see people siding with Denmark. Because the country takes a more basic and practical approach, it attracts design lovers from all around the world. Even during the 2016 Twitter war, when the most famous story of a moose fleeing to Denmark came up, Danish remarked, "It just wasn't accustomed to modern infrastructure from where it came." In a nutshell, Sweden's architecture includes neoclassical traits as well as traditional aspects. They prioritize beauty over usefulness, and Danish people do the opposite. Just look at the Sydney Opera House, which was designed by Danish architect Jørgen Utzon. Aside from that, if you look at the 2023 Country Crime Index, Sweden has a crime index of 48.1%, whereas Denmark has a score of 26.6. As a result, the country has an edge on this front additionally. Aside from policing the country and keeping the peace, Denmark is well known for prioritizing work-life balance more than any other country on the planet. Denmark has a total suicide rate of 10.7%, while Sweden has a rate of 14.7%. As a result, Denmark ranked extremely well in terms of life satisfaction and global happiness. What do you think of these nations' histories now?